and welcome to the Wool and Twine Fibre Studio knitting podcast. My name is Jule and I'm the dyer and maker behind Wool and Twine Fibre Studio, which is a small creative space located here in northern Germany, where I play with natural dyes and natural yarns. Today is an exciting day because I'm going to introduce a new yarn to you, which is something I always love to do because it's something very exciting for me, and I just love to create new yarns and test them thoroughly and then present them to you, which is always something that I really enjoy. Where shall I start? For those of you who are new here, I do not only dye with natural dyes and sell yarns, but I also create my own, either from local shepherds and like gathering wool from local shepherds and sending them off to a mill, or I also collab with several mills where I also source wool via them, like close to them, locally to them, use their network to create other yarns, and this is one of them, and I'm really excited because this one has been in the making for quite a while, and I really enjoy it. I think the last time I had a new yarn that was a limited edition was when I launched my first batch of unspun yarn back in June or so. I don't know, it was somewhere in the early summer. And now I'm really happy to have something very different that I can present to you, that's bringing me a lot of joy right now. So without further ado, let me chat you through the new yarn. I've prepared some swatches, I've prepared 2 samples to show you how the yarn behaves, just so you can get a little bit of an understanding of how this yarn works and what it might be suitable for. And then I also have prepared a little list of pattern suggestions that I can share with you, just so you can have a little bit of inspiration on what can be made with this yarn. About pattern suggestions, it's always a bit tricky because, I mean, it's my personal taste and everyone likes things differently. But I just like to give a little bit of an inspiration on what you can do with this yarn, because especially for this one, I feel like it's extremely versatile and can be used in so many different ways that it can sometimes be difficult to decide. So I'm happy to have a little curated collection, let's say it like this, of patterns that I can show to you, and maybe there's something you like and that you feel inspired by. So I guess I'm gonna start out with the hard facts all around the yarn. It is called Shetland Romney 4-ply, simply because it's a blend of Shetland and Romney wool. And I like to keep things simple when it comes to these kind of yarn bases. And as said, it is a 50-50% Shetland and Romney wool blend that is spun to a worsted spun 2-ply of 350 meters per 100 grams. So it's something between a fingering and a sport, although I would consider it more of a fingering. Without further ado, let me show you. This is the yarn in its undyed state. And with this yarn, when I was designing the blend, I had something in mind where I could have not only one base color, but 2. So I have this natural ecru white and the light grey one, just because I feel it gives a lot more freedom to dye on. Some of you might know if you've been following me for a while, but I just love to dye on non-white yarns because it gives a certain depth, and it's always so exciting to see how the undertone of the yarn benefits the dye, and I just love that. So I wanted something not only a white but also a grey. But then I also decided to make a white batch just because I don't really have a white yarn to dye on that's not a sock yarn, because we normally stock our Corriedale sock yarn, which is a white yarn, but nothing really garment suitable. Like, you can knit garments out of Corriedale sock, but I wanted something more garment suitable. And that's also what I went for this yarn. I wanted something that's extremely versatile and suitable for pretty much everything, from socks to accessories to shawls to garments. And that's definitely what it came to be, in my opinion. The ply in this, I don't know if you can see, but the ply is designed to be a bit more on the looser side, just because that's what I really like in a skein. I just like when the ply is kind of visible and not as round as, for example, in 3 or 4 ply yarns. I just like it to be a bit more accentuated, and yeah, I also feel like that gives a lovely drape. So far about the hard facts. As all of my yarns, this one is non-superwash and plastic free, a fully natural woolen yarn. And I should maybe say that despite this being a worsted spun yarn, I have a feeling it's almost feeling like a woolen spun, or like a semi-worsted spun. I do talk about worsted and woolen spinning in some of my other videos, so I'm not going to talk about this too much in detail, but it just basically means when you have a worsted spun yarn, those are generally a lot smoother and yeah, more even and more dense, just because all the fibers have been combed into one direction before they've been spun. Whereas a woolen spun yarn normally has the fibers only carded, so there can still be ones that are like crisscrossing, and that traps a lot more air in the yarn. Therefore, it ends up being a bit more like voluminous and airy than a worsted spun. So with this one, I would say, despite it being a worsted spun yarn, I feel like it has a touch like a woolen spun, but not as airy. It's something in between, which I really, really like. And I'm just really happy to have this in my lineup now, because with the current standard bases that we have a lot of worsted spun, like traditional worsted spun ones. And this one is just a very new addition to it. Feel-wise, I just love this because it's very soft, in my opinion, but still woolly, because it has a bit of a halo. I don't know if you can see that if I hold it closer to the camera and if it wants to focus, which is why it also feels very warm and woolly at the same time, even though it's also kind of soft and shiny. It's not a sleek yarn, it's more on the woolly side, but I would say it's definitely very, very soft. This is something I'm kind of repeating myself on, because I'm being asked about these kind of things so many times, and it's still difficult for me to answer. Like, if you ask me if a yarn is soft, I'm not going to answer this question, because it's a very individual thing, and just because I think it's very soft doesn't mean that it's soft for you. It's a very individual thing, and it depends on how sensitive you are. So for me, this is very soft, and if I should compare this to our other yarns, I would say it's definitely even a bit softer than our BFL Massam, because it has less of the longer staples in it, which is why I would definitely think this is a shawl suitable yarn, in my opinion. But yeah, it's always a very individual thing, and yeah, this question is always a bit difficult for me if you ask me if it's soft, because I can wear Letlopi or Plötulopi around my neck and I don't mind, but I know some people might not be able to. So if you're really, really insecure whether you can tolerate this yarn, maybe you can email me a list of yarns that you can tolerate, and some that you can't, and I can kind of compare it to those. I mean, it's always difficult to compare a new yarn to something, but yeah, it's the only way I can kind of give you an idea, because I know that this might be a concern. So yeah, just always feel free to maybe email me with some yarns if you're really insecure whether you like the softness of the yarn. So yeah, this is the new Shetland Romney 4-ply, 50% Shetland, 50% Romney, all sourced and spun in the UK. And oh, by the way, I should maybe mention it's also a custom spun yarn. So this is only available at our shop, and it's kind of, yeah, I designed this blend together with the mill, so this is a custom spun yarn for us, which also brings me to the part that I've already been asked about when I was posting about the yarn on Instagram. Some of you asked whether this one is going to be a limited edition or if it comes back. This is not a limited edition in the sense of I got a batch of wool from a local shepherd and shipped it to a mill, and then it's not gonna come back again. But it's also not it's not going to become one of my standard bases, just because I have to work with what the mill has available or with what the mill can source fiber-wise. And I also have to work with the mill's turnaround times, which normally is a couple of months. So yeah, I'm not gonna be able to have this in every update, and although it can make an appearance again, I'm not going to make this kind of a standard. At least that's what I'm thinking right now. I'm not sure what's gonna happen, but yeah, it's limited in a sense, but not a complete limited edition, if that makes sense. But yeah, what's definitely a plan is I'm not going to have this multiple times again in this year. I think I might have some more in the next shop update, depending on, yeah, what's happening, because I'm also expecting other yarns to come and I kind of have to juggle around what to release when. But yeah, this is definitely going to be a yarn that can come back at some point. I just don't know when at this point. So if you see something you like right now, then I think it would be nice to purchase it now, because I'm not sure on when I can restock. But yeah, Shetland Romney 4-ply. And let me now maybe get to the part where I show you a couple of swatches and a sample, just so you can get a little bit of a better idea of how this yarn behaves. All right, let's talk about samples and swatches. As previously mentioned, I designed this yarn to be very versatile and usable for various different knitting projects. And so I also swatched it in all kinds of different needle sizes and such. The first one being like a tight gauge on a smaller needle that you might be using for socks or something. So this is the first swatch in the natural ecru color, and this is knitted on 2.25 millimeter needles. So this would probably be a sock gauge. And as you can see, it's quite bouncy. It bounces back into shape, so it's kind of, it has a nice elasticity, I feel. It's not very stiff. So yeah, you can really move this and it's not gonna lose its shape, I guess. But yeah, this is like a sock gauge. So I'm also going to talk more about this yarn for socks in a bit. But let me first show you the samples. Then we have it held with a strand of silk mohair, which is also very beautiful. Gives a lovely fabric, I feel. I don't know if you can see the halo, but it's very lovely and still quite bouncy and drapey at the same time. So I feel like this is the perfect fabric for a nice plain sweater that can be a real wardrobe staple. I do have something in my pattern suggestions that would work really well with this combo. And just because I know someone's gonna ask, this is the Knitting for Olive silk mohair in the colorway Oat, which works pretty perfectly with this natural color. But I also think there's another shade that's called Silver Grey, and I'm pretty sure that this one will suit it as well, at least the natural color. And I think that one would maybe be a little bit more on the cooler side, while this one is a bit more on the warmer side. So depending on what you prefer, you could use either the Silver Grey or the Oat. So that's our Shetland Romney four-ply with a mohair. And then I also swatched it held double. So I think sometimes it's really hard to have a yarn that works held double. I feel like not every yarn works held double, because sometimes you can just see that there are two strands, and that's not something I personally like. So I'm really happy that with this one things are really blending in, so you can see that it's not really visible that there are two strands held together. And this one is worked, I think, on 4mm needles, and I've also worked a sample on 4.5mm needles, so it should be quite easy to see that it works on several needle sizes. So yeah, and then I made a last swatch. This one is not blocked, so it's a bit wonky maybe, but this is a little textural swatch of the Linden cardigan by Melody Hoffmann. And this one has is knitted on a very open gauge, so that's definitely possible with this yarn. I think this is worked on 4.5mm needles. And you can see it totally works, and it's not see-through or anything. And I'm very sure that even if it's blocked, it would look even more even and nice. So it's definitely perfectly workable on a larger needle size. So at an open gauge, which is something I really like to do, because I know it's not everyone's cup of tea to work on 3mm needles for a whole garment. So it can be nice to have a yarn that's also workable, both held double and at a more open gauge. So it's also a bit more budget and beginner friendly this way. So yeah, these are my little swatches. I hope they're kind of helpful. Let me know if you have any questions about the swatches, because I know it can be, if a yarn is new to you, it can be tricky to work out what project it might be suitable for. But yeah, so far I've swatched from a traditional fingering weight over a DK weight held with mohair, up to a worsted weight held double, and also the more open gauge one, where I would say this is something between a DK and a worsted, like gauge wise, not yarn wise, but gauge wise. So yeah, it's a very versatile yarn, from fingering to worsted, depending on what you use with it and how you use it. And that's definitely something I really like, because yeah, there are so many possibilities on what you can knit with this yarn, which also brings me to the category of showing you some samples. So speaking of samples, some of you might have seen it on Instagram, because I was really last minute knitting on this one, and it's a very generously sized garment, and I maybe miscalculated my time a little bit, and so I was really knitting on the hem of this sample until I think the day before yesterday in the evening. I was knitting until 12 in the night just to finish this one so I could block it and then have it ready for this video. It's still a bit damp, but you can get what I'm talking about, I guess. So I've knitted a sample, which is the Highland slip over by Hayley of Ozetta Knitwear. And this is a beautiful, minimalistic, easy slip over. And I never thought I would ever knit a slip over. I knew it was really on trend, but I always thought I wouldn't pull this off just because I'm a really short person and I feel like I felt like hardcore hobbit look. But with this one I actually thought it could be different because the sleeves are quite wide, and also yeah, they are kind of like a drop shoulder look, so they're not technically it's not technically sleeveless. It has a bit of a sleeve because it's so wide at the top. So this is my Highland slip over. I'm definitely going to insert a few clips of me wearing this one, just because, yeah, it gives you a little bit of a better idea. Let's see if it's me who's gonna wear it or maybe my sister. I'm going to record those clips a bit later, and my sister is currently helping me because she is going to start her first job after finishing her master studies I think in November. So right now she's free after her studies, and I'm very, very happy to have her help me. So we are currently kind of a team of three. It's me, my mum and my sister, and we're trying to get through the seasonal things, you know, because for us yarn dyers and small business makers, it's already the Christmas season, if I may say so. So we have loads and loads of work, and I'm really happy to have her here. But enough of my rambles. One of us is going to show this one off worn, because I think it gives you a better idea of how it behaves. But fabric wise, I think it's really lovely. You can see it has quite a bit of a drape. Sorry for the wrinkles, I just pulled this off my desk and it wrinkled a little bit. But it has a lovely drape, despite being knitted double-stranded, which is what I did for this one to achieve gauge. It really is not stiff at all, as you can see. It really is very drapey and flowy still. And I've worked this one double-stranded in the natural grey colorway of our Shetland Romney 4-ply, held double on 4.5mm needles. So yeah, this is how it turned out. It has a folded collar, which I really like, and I think the yarn really accentuates the folded collar very well. And then it's just a lot of plain stockinette stitch and some ribbed sleeve holes, or however you call this, and the ribbing at the bottom. I don't know if you can see, but yeah, this is my Highland slip over, and I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and I'm definitely seeing myself wearing this a lot, especially while I'm working, because this is something that's really nice about slip overs. If you work a lot with your hands and you're carrying things around, there is no sleeve that could potentially fall into, I don't know, a dye bath or whatever. So this is actually really good for me at work. So I'm definitely gonna wear this one around the studio a lot. At least that's what I'm planning. Yeah, the pattern is really lovely. It's very well written, and I absolutely love how much attention is paid to little details, such as the decreases or increases around the neckline. They're just incredibly smooth, and I just love when designers pay attention to these kind of details. So yeah, it's a very lovely pattern by Hayley of Ozetta Knitwear, and I can only recommend. Modifications wise, I only cropped the the slip over a tiny bit because it's supposed to be a bit longer. But as mentioned, I'm a pretty short person, and generally, if you've been around for a while, you might know that I pretty much crop everything I knit. Just because I'm not tall enough to pull it off otherwise. So yeah, this is my Highland slip over, and I'm really happy about it, and I really love it, and I'm happy to be able to show this to you because I wanted to, like, we all know what to do with a fingering weight yarn, but I also wanted to show that it's very suitable for this season as well, so you can knit garments that are a bit more heavy or like thicker to keep you warm during the winter. And I'm really happy that I managed to finish this just in time for this video. So yeah, this is my Highland slip over, and I'm absolutely happy with this one and can only recommend the pattern. So next up, as mentioned previously, this pattern, this yarn also works on a standard sock gauge, like not pretty much a standard, it's a tiny bit heavier, but you can totally knit a regular sock with it. And so I decided to test whether it would hold up as a sock yarn, because I didn't design it to be a sock yarn, because I would traditionally go for a higher twist and also a different fiber blend. So it was not designed to be a sock yarn, but I kind of feel like sometimes some yarns really surprise me, and I've had very good experiences with fingering weight yarns that weren't designed to be sock yarns, and they held up super well. So I wanted to test it anyways. And luckily I had help from my mum, who's an incredibly fast knitter. So when the yarn arrived, we quickly made a little sock that I could wear around the studio and give it a proper wear test to see whether this one would hold up. And it was actually really funny because I did this kind of a wear test a fair amount of times. For example, when I was launching our limited edition Romney yarn in the beginning of this year, I guess, I did the same, and it's always really funny because I'm giving it a proper wear test. I'm wearing those socks around the studio in shoes for as long as I possibly can every day. And I really, I really torture them, if I may say so. But this way I can give you an honest review on whether I think it holds up as a sock yarn or not. But yeah, with these ones I walked around in my studio shoes for, I don't know, 2 weeks straight. And then I also wore them when we were out in the woods picking mushrooms for at least 3 hours or so in my really rough outdoor boots. So yeah, I've thoroughly tested those. But without further ado, let me just show you the sock. I have this on a blocker because I decided to wash it before I podcast with it, because I wore this for 2 weeks straight. But yeah, this is the sock. Just a standard vanilla sock with a heel flap and gusset. And my mom made this one out of the colorway maroon, dyed on the grey base. And this is how the sock looks. I don't know how far you can see with this kind of a dark colorway, but wear-wise, I would say it held up really well. I did notice that it was pilling a little bit like below the sole of my foot quite quickly, but then like it was not really pilling, it was more like a fluffing, and this fluffy layer kind of felted a little bit, which I really don't mind, because I don't know, maybe you can see it better on this side. It's visible, but it's not bad, and I feel like this little felted part at the bottom just gives a lot more strength to the yarn. and it really helps it to hold up. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you know, it's a bit more like those felted slippers feeling right now. It's not really super felted, but it's like as if the first layer, the fluffy layer, has felted together a little bit and just formed a really sturdy fabric, which is what I really like. So yeah, no thinning, nothing where I could see it really damaged or anything. And yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how this behaved as a sock. So my final verdict would be that it's definitely usable for socks, if you don't mind that it doesn't look as polished after a few wears, because the fluff, as mentioned, the fluff comes up and then it felts together a little bit, and then a few pills might form, but it's really minor. And I think, come on camera, can you focus for a second? Here we go. I think it's really nice that the fluff gives this little bit of a felted sole, just so it holds up better. I don't know. For me personally, this would be something I would knit another pair of socks out of. But yeah, it always depends on personal preference. But the sock test worked for me, and I'm incredibly happy because, yeah, I've been wanting a really warm and woolly sock yarn, or sock suitable yarn for this winter anyways, because I always enjoy these kind of sock yarns loads. I really enjoy, for example, also Tukuwool fingering for socks, or something similar because of the wooliness. And so this is very very close to that, but less rustic. I think it's, if you compare it to Tukuwool fingering, it's more soft, less rustic, but has a similar kind of woolly look and feel to it. Maybe I can just show you the slightly felted part. I will take it off the blocker for a second and maybe show you when I pull it over my hand. So yeah, this is the slightly felted part, and you can see it lost a little bit of its elasticity at the bottom. So maybe if you consider to make socks out of this, it would be advisable to maybe knit them not too tight, just to allow for it to felt a little bit, and then it would be a pity if they were too small then. So I hope, so I would maybe suggest making them a size larger or so. Okay, so far about the sock topic. I hope this little sample show and tell was a bit helpful for you, and that you can imagine how the yarn behaves a little bit now. So in the next section I want to give you a couple of examples of pattern suggestions that I think would work very well with this yarn. I've tried to make to curate a little collection out of patterns that could work with the yarn on its own, held double, held with, for example, a strand of silk mohair or alpaca or whatever. And I've also divided the little collection into garments, socks and shawls, just so you can have a little overview of several patterns that I think would be suitable. I have not swatched for all of them, so I've only used my swatches to see whether I think this yarn would work for the patterns, but please don't judge me if if you have to play around with gauge swatches a little bit, because yeah, I haven't swatched all of them. But yeah, from what I know and from my swatches and from how I worked with this yarn, I would say these patterns would work very well with it. So without further ado, let me tell you about a couple of pattern suggestions for this yarn. Okay, pattern suggestions for our new Shetland Romney 4-ply. First of all, I would like to introduce a little pattern that's just very recently released, and I think it's glorious. I wish I had some more knitting time at the moment so I could make myself a version, but I think I will make one in the spring, but the one I'm talking about is the Pressed Flowers cardigan by Amy Christophers of Savory Knitting, and that one is a cardigan version of her very popular Pressed Flowers shawl, and it's a kind of colorworky pattern where several colors are coming in. I think it's originally designed in a spin cycle yarn, I guess. But there's like one main color and then several colors coming in that are developing a flowery pattern all over the cardigan. It's very beautiful. And I think with the kind of woolliness and grippiness of this yarn, a colorwork pattern would work really, really well. So I guess that one could be very pretty. And of course we've also made, we've dyed a huge palette of colors. So I think there could be a lot of nice combinations for this cardigan. So definitely something I can recommend. Next up is a kind of recent release as well, and that one is the Cargill sweater by Rebecca Clow of Creabea, and she has a podcast on YouTube which I still need to watch. I hope I might find some time on the weekend to binge watch a couple of episodes of hers. But she designed this beautiful textured sweater that has a very rich but also minimalistic texture all over, and I think it's a raglan construction, and that one would be perfect for our Shetland Romney 4-ply together with a strand of silk mohair. I think it's originally designed also in a yarn with a silk mohair, and I think that kind of fluffy halo really highlights the structure of the texture of the pattern. So definitely something, if you're into textured patterns, I think this one would be really pretty. Sorry if I'm looking down here, I have my notes because I couldn't remember all of the patterns on top of my head. Another textured pattern, or at least some kind of texture pattern, would be the Nook by Sandrine C, which is a beautiful pattern that's pretty plain and stockinette in the body part, but it has very pretty textural elements down the sleeves that I think are just glorious. So I think that one would be really lovely with the bouncy texture of our Shetland Romney 4-ply. And it would be workable in just one strand of the Shetland Romney 4-ply because it's designed in a fingering weight yarn, so it should definitely work. And I think it would be very lovely with the drape, and yeah, it would suit the yarn very well, I think. Another sweater that I think some of you might have seen on my podcast, but I think this one would also work really well for this yarn, is the Fairy Bouquet by Joanna Ang. I've knitted a sample out of this one for our limited edition Romney yarn that I released at the beginning of this year. And I'm showing this one in a podcast. I don't know which one it is, but I'm definitely going to link that somewhere so you can watch if you want to see this pattern in action. But that one is also worked with a strand of fingering weight yarn and a strand of silk mohair, and it's just very lovely. It has a very subtle kind of textural yoke and a really interesting pattern going down the sleeves as well, just like the Nook cardigan. It's really, yeah, it's very elaborate and has a beautiful texture, and I think, yeah, this could work beautifully in our new Shetland Romney 4-ply. Yeah, but if you're not really into texture or color work, I've also looked up a couple of patterns that I think would work well that are a bit more plain, or let's not say plain, but more minimalist kind of patterns. One of them being the Clove Sweater by Rachel Kurihara. Sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrongly, but it's a really beautiful kind of cropped plain stockinette sweater that I think is just really beautiful. And I think with this one you would have to use a strand of mohair as well with the yarn. If I'm not mistaken, I don't have the gauge swatch in my head right now, but I think it was like a DK weight, so that should work with a strand of mohair. As well as another kind of minimalistic pattern that I've been wanting to knit for as long as it has been released, I think a couple of months ago. And that one is the Cottage Cardigan by Jacqueline Cieslak. It's a beautiful kind of bat-wingy, but still plain stockinette cardigan. And what I really like about this pattern is that it's minimalistic but designed to fit very well, or not fit very well, but fits in a way that I like to look at it. It has these kind of wide bat-wingy sleeves, and it's just, yeah, it has a lovely little button band, and I just really like how this looks. And I think it could both work with a strand of mohair or just worked at an open gauge, because I think that's what Jackie originally designed this pattern with. I think she went with something kind of open gauge. I'm not really sure at the moment, but it would also work really well with a strand of mohair. So I guess, oh no, there's one more. This one unfortunately is not released yet, but I'm sure it's coming soon. And that one is the Linden cardigan by Melody Hoffmann. I think I showed you the swatch with the little textural elements. That one is designed in a yarn with exactly the same meterage as our Shetland Romney, and she just knits this one at a very open gauge, so I think it's a 4 or 4.5 millimeter needle. So she just knits garter stitch at an open gauge with this kind of yarn, and the cardigan is just beautiful. It has this, let me get the swatch out for a second again. It has this beautiful texture. I think I did something wrong because these little elements here are a bit more spaced out over the cardigan pattern. But yeah, it's this kind of minimalist pattern that still has a little clever twist to it. So I really like that one. So I guess that could work really well in just knitted at a more open gauge as well. But yeah, I think those are the garment recommendations. And of course the Highland slip over that I just showed you in the sample section. That one works perfectly at held double, so it's a worsted weight gauge, and I achieved that easily with the yarn held double. So yeah, held double, it's at a worsted weight, so you could also knit any kind of worsted weight sweaters. I think, a Felix sweater by Amy Christophers would also be really nice. It just came to my head, so I don't really know what the gauge is, but thinking that I know some people have knitted in low P and also in an unspun held double, I think it should work. But don't quote me on that because it just came to my head. But it would be lovely, I guess. Then we also have a couple of shawls that I think would be really pretty in this yarn. One of them being the Navia shawl by Laura Menendez. That one is designed in a worsted weight as well, and it's mostly garter stitch if I remember correctly, and then it has a beautiful textural border that kind of reminds me of leaves flowing around. It's really beautiful. And that one could work as well in our Shetland Romney 4-ply held double. And then I also looked at the Windgate shawl by Fiona Ellis. That one is also designed in a fingering weight yarn with a strand of silk mohair. And I think it's just beautiful. It has this kind of it almost looks like folded, and then opened up again. It has a beautiful texture and is very minimalistic all over. It just has this kind of, yeah, it looks like folded paper, kind of, as if you would fold paper and then fold it up again. It's really beautiful, and I think it was originally released in the 52 Weeks of Shawls book by Laine, but I'm not sure about that right now. Either way, it should be available as an individual pattern by now, so you could get it, I guess. Oh, and then I had a pattern where I think the open gauge thing would work really well again, and that one would be the Mountaineer shawl by Maisa Tomikawa. She designs beautiful, like all of her designs are really beautiful, and I think this shawl has a very interesting kind of intarsia looking pattern where the colors are, it's kind of a color blocking thing, but not a harsh one. So I really love that one. And if you're down for a little bit of color play, then I think this pattern would be really lovely. I can only recommend. And then I also thought, I think it's the original pattern sample is designed in 2 colors as well. So I'm maybe on a bit of a 2-colored shawl kind of inspiration here, but the Equaluit shawl by Wei Jin of the Petite Knitter is also very beautiful. It has a texture all over, and I think 2 halves are designed in different colors, if I'm remembering correctly. Either way, that thing is, or that pattern should work very well with the yarn just held single, and I think it has like a 3mm needle or so, so that should work with the yarn just on its own with no additional strand or so. And then another pattern that would work with the yarn just on its own as well is the Simple Dimple shawl by Maria Matveeva. I think I recommended this one in another video already, and I've always been wanting to knit this one, but yeah, I just need more hands. But it's just a very simple geometrical kind of pattern that's going all over the shawl, and I think it looks very beautiful wrapped, which I find some shawls really just shine if you hold them open, but wrapped around the neck it can be a bit underwhelming, but this one really looks beautiful wrapped around the neck, I think. So yeah, that one is really beautiful as well. And then I think that was it for the shawls, and then we're down to the sock category. And I was really inspired after I knitted, or not I knitted, but after I saw the sock in this yarn and how woolly and grippy it feels and how warm it is generally, I was really inspired to think of some colorwork socks with this yarn, because I think with the slightly more looser twist, it's a bit more filling in the gaps in a colorwork than a traditional high twist sock yarn would maybe do. So I think it could be very beautiful in colorwork socks. And yeah, the most wonderful designer of colorwork socks, in my opinion, is Wei Jin of the Petite Knitter. I would love to knit all of her colorwork socks. They are just all this kind of, you know, pattern all over, and just in a spaced in a beautiful way. And I just, like, for example, the Clair de Lune socks are beautiful, and I think she even has a pair with little sheepy, like little sheep at the cuff, and I think that one is called Ovis. Yeah, but yeah, just basically any colorwork sock by Wei Jin would be beautiful. So yeah, those would pretty much all work. And then I also thought what would be really pretty in this yarn would be the Simple Sock 2 by Melody Hoffmann, who did this kind of simple sock collective thing a couple of years ago. I think it's already a few years ago. But it's just a very simple sock with a couple of bobbles and a kind of interesting cuff design where the cuff goes like a little bit of a zigzag shape. It's really beautiful, and I think that one would really work with a more woolly yarn, just so the bobbles are a bit more fluffy, and I think that would really work very well. And then I also wanted to mention one of my favorite sock pattern designers in general, and that is Devako of Knit Tail Designs, and she designs all kinds of super beautiful textural socks. And one of my favorites that I've also knitted myself at some point, I don't know if I've ever showed them in a podcast, but they're called Caramel in the Pocket, and yeah, they have a very simple ribbed texture with a couple of garter stitch rows in between to break up the ribbed pattern, and yeah, they're very beautiful, and I think they would work beautifully in our new Shetland Romney 4-ply yarn. And then I think the last pattern that came to my mind, because I was thinking it would also be lovely to have a little DK weight sock pattern in our little collection here, where you could use a strand of silk mohair or a packer or whatever works with the Shetland Romney 4-ply, and that one would be, I think they're called, oh yeah, Spruce Cable Socks. I knew it was something around spruce, but Spruce Cable Socks by Natasha Caitlin, I think it's her name. And that one is a beautiful DK weight sock pattern, and yeah, I think it would work lovely and on a DK weight gauge with a strand of silk mohair also. But yeah, that would be very sweet. So I guess we're at the end of this kind of extensive list of patterns. I hope I was able to inspire you a little bit. And I'm going to link all of the patterns that I just mentioned down below, because I'm never sure whether I could actually put a picture on the screen with copyright and everything. I'm never sure whether that would work or if there's an issue with that. So I'm just going to link the patterns below, and as a little disclaimer, the patterns will be linked to Ravelry. If you cannot use Ravelry or you don't want to use Ravelry, I'm also going to write out the names of the designs and the designers, so you can just Google them and see if they are also available on their individual websites or on Lovecrafts or wherever. But yeah, I think we're at the end of this little section. I hope you found this a little inspiring, and that you have a bit of a better idea on how this yarn behaves and what it can be used for. I'm definitely very in love with this new yarn, and I can imagine making a lot of different projects with it, because it's just, yeah, so versatile, and it can be worked at so many different gauges. And yeah, I'm just very happy with this one, as you can maybe guess. No, I do love all the yarns I create, but this one, I don't know, it kind of surprised me, because I wasn't so sure. It was something where I wanted something kind of normal that I could use, that would be like a workhorse yarn that I could use for a lot of different things. And now I'm just very surprised at how beautiful this turned out, and how beautifully it's taking the dye, and yeah, I'm just very happy. Anyways, I'm going to show all the colorways that will be available in a separate video that I'm also going to link here. So you can see what colors we will have available for this shop update. But so far, I guess that's it. If you have any further questions on this base, don't hesitate to reach out to me. The easiest way is always to reach me on email. That's hello@woollentwine.com. I'm also going to link that down below. But you can also DM me on Instagram. But email is definitely always the easiest way to reach me. So I hope I didn't forget anything. But so far I think I've covered everything I wanted around this yarn, and yeah, hope I got you a little inspiration, and see you on the next video. Bye!